What's being described as hate in our communities is not born from personal fault. It's a response, a learned response, to environments engineered to make people feel less than. These neighborhoods, these spaces we now call the hood or the ghetto, they weren't random. They were designed, built intentionally through redlining, disinvestment, and underfunded schools. Policies created to sustain segregation, to strip away opportunities, to lock generations of Black families into cycles of survival. And even after those policies were outlawed, the scars never healed. The consequences remain: poverty, trauma, limited access to good education, healthcare, safe parks, and even clean air. When we talk about the conditions in these neighborhoods, we're not talking about some natural phenomenon. We're talking about systems that were engineered. Now, here's the truth that's hard to sit with. When you've been raised in an environment where safety, opportunity, and dignity are constantly denied, survival becomes the priority. And when survival is the priority, the nervous system is wired for hypervigilance, not creativity, for conflict, not collaboration, for defense, not trust. This is why, when you see a young Black kid daring to dream, wanting to do something outside the norm, to be different, to express their creativity, sometimes that dream gets mocked. And it's not because our people are naturally hateful or jealous. It's because internalized oppression runs deep. Carter G. Woodson wrote about this nearly a century ago in The Miseducation of the Negro. He showed how generations of Black people were taught to despise themselves, their history, their worth, because a system built to oppress us thrives when we doubt ourselves and each other. Psychologists call this internalized oppression, when you're told over and over, by policies, by teachers, by the media, that you are less than. Those lies can start to live in your body. They turn into shame, self-doubt, and yes, sometimes ridicule of anyone who tries to rise above. John Ogbu's research on oppositional culture explains how, in some communities, academic success or ambition is seen as acting white, not because we don't value excellence, but because history taught us that standing out often came with punishment or pain. And yet, even in the middle of that pain, there's resilience, there's strength. Look at the history. Black communities have always preserved identity as a shield. Sociologist Julius Wilson wrote about how, in the face of job discrimination and systemic exclusion, we built tight internal networks for survival, neighbors taking care of neighbors, Black mutual aid societies, and churches that became lifelines. France Fanon and Bell Hooks both remind us, reclaiming our identity isn't just healing, it's resistance. It's saying, we are still here. We matter. We belong. That collective identity is how we survived centuries of oppression. It gave us belonging in a world that treated us as disposable. It turned pain into culture, music, art, language, into power. But let's be honest. There's a double edge here. That same identity that kept us alive can also keep us stuck. Because survival mode teaches you to keep your circle tight, to police difference, to mistrust ambition or change. So when younger generations start processing trauma and naming systemic harm, when they look back and blame their parents or their grandparents for being toxic or closed-minded, I need us to pause. We are pointing the finger in the wrong direction. Our parents, our grandparents, they did the best they could with what they had. They were taught that toughness, control, and survival were the only ways to make it through. Many of them never had the resources, the safety, or the education to even imagine self-love, to imagine healing. They were surviving, not thriving. That doesn't mean we excuse harm. It means we understand it in context. It means we stop blaming the people and start blaming the systems. Because the truth is, systemic racism, the redlining, the disinvestment, the underfunded schools, the generational trauma baked into policy. That is the villain here. Patricia Hill Collins talks about this beautifully in Black feminist thought. She writes about how intersecting oppressions like race, class, and gender don't just create pain, they also create frameworks for resilience, for creativity, for community. And when we build spaces for collective healing, when we take that pain and turn it into art, advocacy, and innovation, we are reclaiming what was stolen from us. But we have to recognize something. Not everyone has the privilege to heal at the same pace. Some of us, through education, access, therapy, or sheer luck, have found the space to start rewriting our narratives, to integrate safety into our bodies, to explore creativity without fear. But so many of our brothers and sisters are still in survival mode. They don't have the space or the safety to do that work yet. And that's where compassion has to come in. Choosing to thrive, to develop self-love beyond the painful messages we inherited, is an act of radical resilience. But it's also a privilege. A gift not everyone around us has had the chance to receive. So let's not turn against each other. Let's not confuse the symptom with the disease. Systemic racism is the disease. Generational trauma is the scar tissue it leaves behind. And until we name that, until we address the systems that created and sustain these conditions, we'll stay divided, blaming one another while the real enemy keeps winning. W.E.B. Du Bois called this double consciousness, the painful awareness of seeing yourself through the eyes of a society that devalues you, while trying to hold on to your sense of self. Healing that takes time. It takes safety. It takes collective effort. But here's the hope. We have what we need to start rewriting the story. We have the brilliance, the creativity, the resilience, the love. And we have the responsibility to see the bigger picture, to honor where we've been, to understand why we are the way we are, and to start building the communities we deserve. Because when we stop pointing fingers at each other, when we start pointing them at the systems that built the cages, that's when we win. Join the mailing list at neuronor.org for more trauma-informed education, empowerment, and narrative reframing.